I bought a cabin in the mountains so I could finally have something of my own after 50 years of putting everyone else first. No demands, no guilt trips, just the silence and the sky. Then my son and his wife walked through the door and said, "We'll need a key made for us, of course. It's the least you can do since Dad's money paid for it." I didn't say anything then, but I began planning a surprise that would shatter everything they thought they knew. Hello everyone, before we continue, make sure you're already subscribed to the channel, and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. The keys felt heavier than they should have. I stood in Margaret Chen's real estate office in Whitefish, holding them while she organized documents I'd already signed. Outside the window, October wind scattered yellow leaves across the parking lot. "Congratulations, Mrs. Calloway," Margaret smiled warmly. "You're officially a property owner in Flathead County." The cashier's check for $212,000 had cleared my account that morning. It represented everything my late husband Harold and I had saved for 47 years. Every overtime shift he worked at the mill. Every coupon I clipped. Every vacation we delayed. Harold died 3 years ago without seeing this dream realized, but I'd finally done it. I'd bought our cabin. The drive up to the property took 90 minutes through winding mountain roads lined with towering pines. The cabin sat on 8 acres, 12 miles from the nearest town, surrounded by wilderness that stretched endlessly in every direction. It was perfect. 800 square feet of pine logs and river stone, with a wraparound porch overlooking a valley where elk grazed at dawn. I spent the first week organizing everything exactly how I wanted it. My books on the shelves. Harold's fishing rods mounted above the fireplace. Photographs of us from better years arranged on the mantel. No one to answer to. No one to serve. Just peace. Just silence. Just mine. Then my son Leo called. His voice had that edge it always carried when he wanted something. "Mom, Isabel and I are driving up this weekend to see the cabin. We're so proud of you. Bring the kids too," I said. "I'd love to see them." He paused. "Actually, it'll just be us. We need to talk about some things." The way he said it made my stomach tighten, but I pushed the feeling aside. They arrived Saturday afternoon in Leo's new truck, the one I didn't ask how he afforded. Isabel stepped out wearing designer sunglasses and boots that had never seen real dirt. She looked at the cabin like she was inspecting a hotel room. I gave them the tour, pointing out the features I loved most. The stone fireplace Harold would have built himself if his back had held out. The kitchen window framing the mountain view. The guest room where the grandchildren could stay when they visited. Isabel walked through each room with her phone out, taking pictures and making small noises that weren't quite approval. Leo followed silently, hands in his pockets, not meeting my eyes. When we reached the master bedroom, Isabel finally spoke. "This would make a better guest room, actually. You should take the smaller one. You don't need all the space." I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. We settled on the porch with coffee I'd made from the new machine I'd bought myself. The afternoon sun painted the valley gold. For a moment, everything felt right. Then Isabel leaned forward with that smile she used when she wanted something. "Beatrice, we've been talking. This cabin is absolutely perfect for family weekends. We were thinking we could come up twice a month, maybe more in summer. We'll need to get a key made for us, of course." Her words hung in the air like smoke. I set my coffee down carefully. "This is my home, Isabel. You're always welcome to visit when I invite you, but this isn't a vacation rental." Leo finally spoke, and his voice carried his father's disappointment without his father's kindness. "Mom, let's be real. Dad's life insurance paid for this place. His money. That makes it family property, doesn't it? Isabel nodded, warming to the theme. Exactly. We're not trying to take anything from you, but it's only fair we have access. After all, what are you going to do with all the space? You'll be lonely up here by yourself. We're thinking of you. The sunset turned the valley red while I stared at my son and saw a stranger. It's the least you can do, Isabel continued, since Dad's money paid for it. And really, we should probably discuss putting our names on the deed too. For estate planning purposes. You understand. I told them no. I said it clearly, calmly, the way I'd practiced standing up for myself in the mirror after Harold died. This cabin is mine alone. Harold left that money to me specifically. You're welcome to visit as guests, but this isn't your property. The words should have ended the conversation. Instead, they started a war I didn't know I was fighting. Leo's face darkened in a way that reminded me of his teenage years, when he didn't get what he wanted. Mom, you're being selfish. Isabel shook her head slowly, like I was a confused child. We're not asking for much, Beatrice. Just reasonable access to what's essentially family property. I stood my ground, feeling Harold's wedding ring on my finger like armor. The cabin deed is in my name only. The money came from Harold's life insurance, which was paid directly to me as the beneficiary. This is not up for discussion. The temperature on the porch seemed to drop 20 degrees. Leo exchanged a glance with Isabel, some silent communication I wasn't part of. When he looked back at me, his expression had shifted into something calculated. You know what I think? I think you're not thinking clearly. You're isolated up here. You're making decisions without family input. That's concerning. The implication landed like a slap. Isabel picked up the thread seamlessly, her voice dripping false concern. We've noticed you've been different since Harold died. More withdrawn. Making big financial decisions alone. Moving to the middle of nowhere where no one can check on you. Don't you think that's worrying? She reached across the table as if to pat my hand, but I pulled away. I'm 72 years old with a sharp mind and my own money. I don't need checking on. Leo leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. That's exactly what someone who needs help would say, Mom. You're hoarding what should be shared with family. Dad would be ashamed. The mention of Harold hit exactly where Leo intended. My eyes stung, but I refused to let them see me cry. Your father and I planned this cabin together. We saved for it together. He wanted me to have this. Leo scoffed. Dad wanted you to have a nice retirement, sure. He didn't want you to cut your family out. You're acting like we're strangers trying to rob you. We're your son and daughter-in-law. We're thinking about your well-being. Isabel nodded vigorously. Exactly. What happens if you fall? What if you get sick up here alone? You're being irresponsible, and honestly, it's cruel to shut us out when we're only trying to help. The conversation spiraled for another hour. Every boundary I tried to set, they twisted into evidence of my selfishness. Every time I mentioned my rights to my own property, they countered with accusations that I was tearing the family apart. By the time they left, I felt hollowed out, questioning my own sanity. Was I being unreasonable? Was it selfish to want something that was only mine? I spent that night sitting on the porch wrapped in Harold's old flannel jacket, watching the stars wheel overhead. In the morning, I found a text from Leo. We're disappointed in you, Mom. We'll give you time to reconsider. Family should come first. Always. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was my daughter Margot, Leo's sister, calling from Seattle. Mom, what's going on? Leo called me saying you're acting strange. That you bought some cabin in the woods and you're refusing to let family use it. He's worried about you. The betrayal cut deeper than Leo's words had. Margot, I bought a cabin with my own money. Leo and Isabel want me to give them keys and put their names on the deed. That's not reasonable. There was a long pause. Mom, I don't want to take sides, but maybe you should consider what they're saying. You are alone up there. It does seem sudden. Are you sure you're okay? I realized then that Leo and Isabel weren't just trying to guilt me. They were building a narrative, spreading it through the family like poison, painting me as an unstable old woman who needed to be managed. The cabin wasn't the prize. Control was. Control over me, my money, my choices, my life. I hung up with Margot feeling more alone than I had since Harold's funeral. But loneliness burns away fast when you realize you're under attack. I pulled out my laptop and started taking notes. Every conversation. Every text. Every manipulation. If Leo and Isabel wanted a war, I'd give them one. But I'd fight it my way. Carefully. Methodically. And with a surprise they'd never see coming. 3 weeks passed in tense silence. I didn't call Leo. He didn't call me. I started to believe maybe they'd dropped it, moved on to easier targets. Then I drove into town for groceries on a Thursday morning, and when I returned 4 hours later, there were 3 vehicles parked in front of my cabin. Leo's truck. 2 cars I didn't recognize. Music thumped from inside my home, loud enough to send birds scattering from nearby trees. My hands shook as I parked. I hadn't given anyone keys. I'd locked every door and window before I left. How did they get in? I walked up the porch steps slowly, giving myself time to breathe, to think. Through the window, I could see people moving inside. Strangers in my living room, holding drinks, laughing. I opened the door to find my worst nightmare made real. Leo and Isabel had brought friends for a weekend party. In my cabin. Without permission. Without even asking. The furniture had been rearranged. Someone had moved Harold's fishing rods. There were wet rings on my coffee table where glasses had been carelessly set down. Isabel saw me first. Her smile was bright and utterly shameless. Beatrice! You're back early. We were just showing everyone the new family cabin. I felt my voice rising despite my intention to stay calm. How did you get in? Leo dangled a key from his finger. Had a copy made from the one you left here last time. Figured you wouldn't mind family stopping by. This isn't your property. You can't just break in. A woman I'd never met spoke up from my couch, drink in hand. Break in? Leo said you were fine with them using the place. He said you were just being forgetful about giving them keys. This is family property, right? Isabel jumped in quickly. That's right. Beatrice gets confused sometimes. Age, you know. But we're working it out. The casual dismissal of my sanity, said in front of strangers, in my own home, ignited something in me I'd kept buried since Harold's funeral. Everyone out. Now. Leo didn't move. Mom, you're embarrassing yourself. These are our friends. We drove 3 hours to get here. You can't just throw us out of what's practically our cabin too. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. I'm calling the sheriff. This is trespassing. One of Leo's friends set down his beer and stood up. Dude, you said your mom was cool with this. This is weird. I'm out. The group began gathering their things, shooting uncomfortable glances between me and Leo. Isabel's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw real anger underneath. You're really going to do this? Embarrass your son in front of his friends? What is wrong with you? I didn't answer. I just stood by the open door, phone in hand, while they filed out. Leo was the last to leave. He stopped in the doorway close enough that I could smell the beer on his breath. You're going to regret this, Mom. We were trying to be nice, trying to include you. But if you want to play hardball, we can play hardball. The truck engines started. Music still playing. Gravel spraying as they pulled away. I locked the door behind them and slid down to sit on the floor, back against the wood, shaking. They'd been in my home. Touched my things. Invaded the one space that was supposed to be safe. I noticed the window by the kitchen then. The lock was broken, forced open. That's how they'd gotten in. Not with a copied key. With a crowbar. I took photos of everything. The broken lock. The displaced furniture. The empty beer bottles left on my counter. Then I called a locksmith in town, paid extra for same-day service, and had every lock in the cabin changed. New deadbolts. New windows locks. New door handles. By sunset, I had a cabin full of keys that Leo and Isabel would never have copies of. If you're enjoying this story, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next. And hit that like button if you think Beatrice did the right thing. Drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever dealt with entitled family members? We read every comment. The retaliation came fast. Within 3 days, my phone started ringing with concerned family members. First it was my cousin Dolores in Montana. Beatrice, honey, Leo called me yesterday. He's worried sick about you. Said you changed all your locks and won't let anyone in. Are you having some kind of episode? I tried to explain the truth. He broke into my cabin, Dolores. He brought strangers to my home without permission. I had to change the locks. She made a soft, pitying sound. Oh, sweetie. I know losing Harold was hard. But locking yourself away from family isn't healthy. Leo just wants to help. My brother Richard called next. His voice was stern in that way it got when he decided I was wrong before hearing my side. Your son drove 6 hours to visit you and you called the cops on him? What the hell, Beatrice? I didn't call the cops. I threatened to because he broke in. There was a pause. He said you invited them and then forgot. Said you're getting forgetful. That you're isolated up there making poor decisions. Richard, I'm 72, not senile. I know when I invite people to my house. He sighed heavily. Look, maybe you should come stay with us for a while. Get back around people. Sell that cabin before you spend all your money on something you can't maintain alone. The narrative was spreading faster than I could counter it. Every family member Leo contacted heard the same story. Mom's losing it. Mom's paranoid. Mom's isolated herself in the woods and won't accept help. Mom's being cruel to family who only want to support her. By the end of the week, I'd received 11 concerned calls, 4 emails suggesting I see a doctor, and 1 voicemail from Leo's brother-in-law strongly implying I should consider assisted living. The isolation they'd warned about became a weapon they wielded against me. Look how alone she is. Look how she's pushing everyone away. Isn't that concerning? Doesn't that prove our point? The church I'd attended for 30 years called next. Pastor William's voice was gentle but worried. Beatrice, some folks have expressed concern. They say you're struggling since Harold passed. We have resources, counseling, grief support groups. I'd appreciate if people worried less about me and more about bearing false witness. There was a long, uncomfortable silence. I understand you're upset. Grief makes us say things we don't mean. Why don't you come in and we'll talk? I hung up. The funeral I'd planned for Harold at that church. The potlucks I'd organized. The bake sales I'd run for 20 years. None of it mattered. Leo's story was simpler, more compelling. Old widow loses her mind. Tale as old as time. I stopped answering my phone unless I recognized the number. Started letting calls go to voicemail so I could hear what people really thought. The messages painted a clear picture. My own family believed I was unstable. Some were genuinely concerned. Others, I suspected, were already calculating what they might inherit if I was declared incompetent. Leo and Isabel had successfully isolated me, not by keeping me away from family, but by turning family away from me. Every person who might have supported me now questioned my sanity. Every boundary I set became more evidence of my deterioration. It was brilliant in its cruelty. And it was working. Then came the email that made my blood run cold. It was from Isabel, sent to 15 family members with me on copy. Subject line, worried about Beatrice, next steps. The email detailed their concerns in clinical language clearly written to sound official. Beatrice has become increasingly hostile toward family. She's isolated herself in a remote location against advice. She's making erratic financial decisions. She refuses help and has become paranoid. We believe she may need a competency evaluation and possibly assisted living placement for her own safety. We're consulting with an elder care attorney to explore options. We love her and want what's best. I read it 3 times, each word sinking in deeper. They weren't just trying to guilt me anymore. They were building a case. A legal case. To prove I was mentally unfit. To take control of my property, my money, my life. The cabin wasn't the endgame. I was. They wanted me declared incompetent, placed somewhere they could manage me, and control of all Harold's life insurance money that still sat in my accounts. The cabin was just the first asset they'd tried to claim. I sat at my kitchen table as the sun set over the valley, and I made a decision. I'd fought politely. I'd fought fairly. I'd tried to set reasonable boundaries. And they'd responded by trying to destroy my reputation and take my freedom. Fine. If they wanted to play legal games, I'd play. But they'd picked the wrong old woman to underestimate. The lawyer's letter arrived by certified mail on a Monday morning 3 weeks later. I knew what it was before I opened it. The return address was a firm in Helena, 3 hours away. Prestigious letterhead. Expensive paper. Inside, 5 pages of legal language that boiled down to a simple message. Leo and Isabel were demanding I add their names to the cabin deed. Their argument was creative, I'd give them that. They claimed Harold's life insurance should be considered marital property divided between me and his children. That the cabin, purchased with that money, was therefore partially owned by Leo. They cited obscure state law about family assets and equitable distribution. They gave me 20 days to comply or face a lawsuit. I read every word twice, my coffee going cold beside me. The letter referenced Harold's will, which had left everything to me. But it argued the will hadn't specifically mentioned the cabin because we'd bought it after his death. It was a legal theory built on quicksand, but it didn't matter if it was valid. What mattered was it would be expensive to fight. Court costs. Attorney fees. Months or years of my life spent in depositions and hearings. Even if I won, I'd lose. They knew I knew that. The letter ended with an offer. Add their names to the deed now, give them unlimited access, and they'd drop the whole thing. Fighting it would only prove their point about my mental state. I called my daughter Margot, hoping she'd see through this. She answered on the third ring, her voice cautious. Mom. I got a copy of the letter. Margot, this is extortion. They're threatening to sue me for property that's legally mine. There was a long pause. I don't know, Mom. I read it. Their lawyer makes some good points about Dad's estate. Maybe you should just compromise. Give them partial ownership. Keep the peace. The betrayal hit harder than Leo's letter had. You think I should give away half my property to keep the peace? I think I don't want to watch my family destroy itself over a cabin. You're being stubborn, and Leo's being aggressive, and I'm tired of being in the middle. I hung up without saying goodbye. There was no middle to be in. There was only my property and their attempt to steal it. But Margot's words circled in my head. Their lawyer makes some good points. Was I wrong? Had I missed something? I pulled out Harold's will and read it again. Everything I own, real and personal property, I leave to my beloved wife Beatrice. Simple. Clear. Unambiguous. But the lawyer's letter had planted doubt, and doubt was their weapon. Even if the lawsuit failed, the process would exhaust me, bankrupt me, isolate me further. Unless I found a better weapon. A bigger weapon. One they wouldn't see coming. I drove into Whitefish the next morning and found the law office of Margaret Chen's husband, David Thornton. He specialized in estate planning and elder law, according to his website. I walked in without an appointment carrying a folder of documents. Every text from Leo and Isabel. Photos of the break-in. The threatening letter. Printed emails from the smear campaign. I'd learned something in 50 years of marriage and 3 years of widowhood. Document everything. Trust nothing. Assume everyone will lie. I was done being the sweet old lady who took abuse with a smile. It was time to become something else entirely. David Thornton was in his 60s, gray-haired and sharp-eyed. He spent 2 hours reviewing my documents without interrupting. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and whistled low. Mrs. Calloway, you're not crazy. You're under attack by people who think you're an easy target. The relief nearly broke me. Someone believed me. Someone saw what I saw. What are my options? I asked. He smiled, and it wasn't friendly. It was the smile of a man who enjoyed his work. We're going to build you a legal fortress they can't touch. And then we're going to bait a trap. If your son and daughter-in-law want to play legal games, let's play. But we'll play to win. He outlined the strategy over the next hour. First, establish a revocable living trust with an independent trustee. Put the cabin and all my assets into it. Make it legally impossible for them to claim. Second, get a complete medical evaluation establishing mental competency. Remove their ammunition. Third, document every threat and instance of harassment. Build a case for restraining orders if needed. And fourth, the twist. Include a clause in the trust. A poison pill. Harold had actually done something similar in his original will, David said, reviewing the documents. This clause here. It states that any heir who contests the will or your decisions regarding his estate forfeits their inheritance entirely. We can expand that. Make it ironclad. Make it their worst nightmare. We're halfway through the story, and things are about to get even more intense. If you want to see how Beatrice destroys their plans, make sure you're subscribed and that notification bell is on. Drop a comment telling us what you think Beatrice should do next. The best comment will get a shout out in our next video. David Thornton didn't waste time. Within 48 hours, he drafted the trust documents and scheduled my medical evaluation. The trust was a masterpiece of legal protection. Everything I owned, cabin, bank accounts, Harold's remaining life insurance funds, all of it went into the Calloway family trust. I was named as primary beneficiary with full control during my lifetime. But the trustee wasn't me. It was a trust company, independent and unimpeachable. Leo and Isabel couldn't claim I was managing my assets incompetently because I wasn't managing them. A neutral third party was. And they'd have to prove that company was incompetent too. Good luck with that. The medical evaluation happened on a Thursday at Whitefish Medical Center. Dr. Sarah Patterson was thorough to the point of exhausting. Cognitive tests. Memory assessments. Physical examination. Psychiatric screening. She asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens. Name the presidents. Recall 3 words after a 5-minute delay. Draw a clock showing 3:15. I passed everything. She wrote a detailed letter on official letterhead stating I showed no signs of cognitive decline, dementia, or impairment. I was of sound mind and fully capable of managing my affairs. David had me mail copies to every family member who'd received Isabel's email. No more whisper campaigns about my mental state. But the real weapon was the poison pill clause buried in Section 7 of the trust. Harold's original will had contained a basic version. David expanded it into something comprehensive and devastating. Any beneficiary who challenges the trust, attempts to claim ownership of trust assets, files litigation against the trustee or primary beneficiary, or engages in harassment or coercion regarding trust property shall be immediately and permanently removed as a beneficiary. Their inheritance shall be redistributed to remaining beneficiaries or charities of the trustee's choice. It was elegant. It was brutal. And it meant any legal action Leo and Isabel took would cost them everything, not just the cabin fight. Their entire inheritance from Harold's estate. Gone. I signed the trust documents in David's office on a Monday morning. My hand was steady. Margaret Chen's husband had become my attorney, had seen me through Harold's will, and now this. The cabin, purchased for $212,000, now legally belonged to the Calloway family trust. The deed was transferred. The trust was recorded with the county. There was no reversing it. No lawsuit Leo could file would change ownership because I no longer owned it. The trust did. And the trust had rules. Ironclad, lawyer-drafted, court-tested rules. David shook my hand. You're protected now. Whatever they try, they can't touch you. But we're not done. Now we spring the trap. The trap required patience. We sent a formal response to Leo's lawyer declining their demand. The response was cold, professional, and included a copy of the trust documents. The cabin is no longer owned by Beatrice Calloway. It is owned by an irrevocable trust. Your clients have no legal standing to claim ownership. Furthermore, any litigation will result in their permanent removal as beneficiaries under the trust's no contest clause. We recommend you advise your clients to cease all harassment immediately. I imagined Leo reading that letter. The confusion. The rage. The slow realization that his carefully built legal theory had just evaporated. That he'd been outmaneuvered by the old woman he thought was too confused to fight back. 2 days later, my phone rang. Leo. I let it go to voicemail. Mom, what the hell did you do? You can't just hide assets in a trust to keep them from family. That's not legal. We're going to fight this. Our lawyer says we have options. You're not going to win. I saved the voicemail. Sent it to David. He laughed when he heard it. They're panicking. That's good. Let them panic. Let them consult lawyers who'll tell them the truth about how airtight this is. Let them waste money on legal consultations while we wait. The poison pill clause was designed not to stop them. It was designed to make them stop themselves. To make their own greed their downfall. 3 weeks passed. I heard through the family grapevine that Leo and Isabel had consulted 2 more attorneys. Both had apparently told them the same thing. The trust was legal. The no contest clause was enforceable. If they sued and lost, which they would, they'd lose everything. But I knew Leo. I'd raised him. He was stubborn. He didn't accept defeat. He'd find another way. And I needed him to. Because David's trap wasn't just the trust. It wasn't just the poison pill. Those were defenses. What we needed now was for them to trigger it publicly. Spectacularly. In front of witnesses. That's when David smiled and said, "I think it's time you invited them to a family gathering at the cabin. One last chance to work things out. They won't be able to resist." And I understood. The surprise wasn't ready yet. But it was coming. I sent the invitation by text message to avoid accusations I'd forgotten a conversation. Family gathering at the cabin, Saturday at 2 p.m. Time to settle this like adults. Bring whoever you want. Let's end the fighting. I knew Leo would interpret it as surrender. He'd assume I was caving, ready to negotiate some compromise that gave them what they wanted. David had predicted it. Narcissists can't imagine losing. They'll see an invitation to negotiate as proof they're winning. So they'll come. And they'll bring an audience. The response came within an hour. "We'll be there, Mom. Glad you're finally being reasonable. We're bringing Margot and Richard. Family should decide this together." Saturday arrived cold and bright. November in Montana meant early snow, and the valley wore a light dusting of white. I'd spent the morning preparing. Coffee and pastries set out like this was a normal family visit. David Thornton arrived at 1:30, carrying his briefcase. He'd volunteered to attend as my attorney and witness. He wasn't charging me for this. He said watching entitled people face consequences was payment enough. We waited in comfortable silence, drinking coffee and watching elk graze in the distance. I felt calm. Maybe it was the knowledge that Harold's foresight was about to protect me. Maybe it was just exhaustion. Either way, I was ready. Whatever happened next, I'd built the fortress. Now I'd see if it held. The vehicles started arriving at 1:45. Leo and Isabel first, in that expensive truck. Then Margot's rental car, she'd flown in from Seattle. Richard's pickup. And 2 more vehicles I didn't immediately recognize. When they all climbed out, I counted 12 people. Leo had brought friends, backup, an audience for what he thought would be my capitulation. They filed into my cabin like they owned it, claiming seats, helping themselves to coffee. Isabel smiled at me with false warmth. "Beatrice, we're so glad you're ready to talk reasonably. This has been hard on everyone." I smiled back. "We'll get to that. Let's wait until everyone's settled." When everyone was seated, Leo stood like he was running a meeting. "Okay, Mom. We're here. We're listening. You wanted to talk about the cabin situation. David suggests you start by telling everyone what you want. I looked at my son, at his wife, at my daughter and brother who'd believed the worst of me. At the strangers Leo had brought to outnumber me in my own home. Then I looked at David, who nodded slightly. I spoke clearly, making sure every person heard. I invited you here because you've spent months harassing me, breaking into my home, spreading lies about my mental state, and threatening legal action. I wanted witnesses for what happens next. Leo's smile faltered. What are you talking about? You said you wanted to settle this. I do. By making something absolutely clear. This cabin is not family property. It will never be family property. And anyone who tries to claim it will lose everything. Isabel stood up, face flushed. This is ridiculous. We're not doing this. Harold's money should be shared with his children. That's only right. That's what we're going to prove in court. David stood then, and the room went quiet. His presence commanded attention. I'm David Thornton, Mrs. Calloway's attorney. I'd like everyone here to witness what I'm about to explain. He opened his briefcase. He pulled out copies of the trust documents and began distributing them. The cabin is owned by an irrevocable trust established by Mrs. Calloway. Section 7 contains what's called a no contest clause, originally drafted by Harold Calloway himself in his will. This clause states clearly that any beneficiary who challenges the trust or attempts to claim trust assets will be immediately disinherited. They forfeit all rights to Harold's estate. Leo grabbed the papers, scanning them rapidly. This is bullshit. You can't do this. This is manipulation. David's voice remained calm. It's completely legal and enforceable. Harold included this clause specifically to prevent his assets from being fought over after his death. He wanted to protect his wife. Your mother has simply honored his wishes. Richard spoke up, confused. Wait. So if Leo sues, he loses his inheritance? All of it? David nodded. Everything. The clause is comprehensive. And I should mention that any litigation costs would come from the estate before distribution, so even other beneficiaries would see reduced inheritances if this goes to court. By fighting, you damage everyone. Margot looked stricken. Leo, you didn't tell me this. Leo rounded on me, fury replacing shock. You manipulated Dad's will. You twisted his words. He never would have cut out his own son. I met his eyes steadily. Your father wrote that clause himself 10 years ago. He told me exactly why. He said, Beatrice, if any of our kids ever try to bully you out of what's yours, they don't deserve anything. He knew you, Leo. Better than I wanted to admit. Things are about to explode. Don't go anywhere. If you're gripped by this story, show us some love with a like and a subscription. Comment below and tell us, is Beatrice savage or justified? Let us know. The silence in the cabin stretched like wire about to snap. Isabel recovered first, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. This is elder abuse. You're manipulating her. She doesn't understand what she's signed. David, you should be disbarred for taking advantage of a vulnerable widow. David didn't rise to the bait. Mrs. Calloway underwent a complete medical and psychiatric evaluation 3 weeks ago. Dr. Sarah Patterson certified her fully competent. I have the documentation here if you'd like to review it. He produced another document. Furthermore, every step of the trust creation was witnessed, recorded, and legally sound. Your accusations are baseless and, frankly, defamatory. Isabel's face went white, then red. She looked at the assembled family members, searching for support. Richard cleared his throat uncomfortably. Beatrice, I don't understand. Why go through all this? Why not just tell Leo no and be done with it? I turned to my brother, and 30 years of resentment leaked into my voice. I did tell him no, Richard. Repeatedly. He broke into my home. Changed my locks without permission. Threw a party here with strangers. Then he launched a campaign to convince everyone I'm senile. He threatened to sue me. He tried to destroy my reputation to steal my property. I gestured at the trust documents, this is what I had to do to protect myself from my own son. Richard looked at Leo with new eyes. You broke in? You said she'd invited you. Leo's jaw worked silently. He glanced at his friends, realizing too late that bringing witnesses had been a catastrophic mistake. One of them, a man in his 40s, stood up. Man, I think we should go. This is family business. He and the others filed out quickly, embarrassment evident. Now it was just family and David. Margot spoke quietly, tears in her eyes. Leo, what did you do? Isabel tried to control the narrative one more time. We were trying to help. She was alone up here, making bad decisions. Someone had to intervene. But her voice lacked conviction now. The room had turned against them. David returned to his briefcase and pulled out another folder. Since we're all here, there are additional matters Mrs. Calloway wants addressed. Over the past months, Leo and Isabel have engaged in harassment, trespassing, defamation, and attempted coercion. Mrs. Calloway has documented everything. We've prepared restraining order paperwork if necessary. He spread photographs across the coffee table. The broken window. The displaced furniture. Screenshots of threatening texts. Printed emails from the smear campaign. Leo's voicemail saying you're going to regret this. The evidence was damning. My brother picked up one of the photos, his face grim. Jesus, Leo. I found my voice again, stronger now. I don't want a restraining order against my son. I don't want to go to court. I want this to end. But it ends my way. You will never claim ownership of this cabin. You will never enter without explicit invitation. You will stop spreading lies about my competency. And you will accept that Harold's trust, which he created to protect me, is final. If you can do those things, we can rebuild. If you can't, then the no contest clause activates the moment you file any legal action. Your choice. Leo stood frozen, his whole body rigid. Years of entitlement colliding with reality. Isabel grabbed his arm. Let's go. We'll find another lawyer. This can't be legal. But Leo didn't move. I watched my son's face as the calculations ran. How much was his pride worth? How much was winning worth? David had predicted this moment. The poison pill worked because it turned greed against itself. Leo wanted Harold's money more than he wanted the cabin. The cabin was symbolic, about control. But actual inheritance was practical, spending money. If he sued and lost, he'd have nothing. His shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. The fight drained out of him like air from a punctured tire. Margot broke the silence. Mom, I'm sorry. I should have listened to you. I should have believed you. I looked at my daughter and saw genuine remorse. It's not your fault, honey. Leo's very convincing. But now you know the truth. Richard nodded slowly. Beatrice, I owe you an apology too. I thought a lot of things that weren't true. I'm sorry. The apologies helped, but they didn't erase the months of isolation, the nights I'd questioned my own sanity. Still, they were something. David gathered his documents. I think we're done here unless anyone has questions about the trust provisions. Leo finally spoke, his voice hollow. We're done. Come on, Isabel. They left without another word, without looking back. Isabel's heels clicked angrily across the porch. Truck doors slammed. Engines started. Then they were gone, taking with them months of conflict and years of my illusions about my son. Margot stayed behind, crying quietly. Richard made more coffee. David shook my hand. You did well, Beatrice. You protected yourself. That took courage. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. Harold would be proud. David smiled. Harold gave you the tools. You had the strength to use them. That's all him in spirit, all you in action. January brought thaw and clarity. Margot called with news that Leo and Isabel had separated. Apparently, the stress of losing their legal battle and the public humiliation had cracked their marriage. Leo had moved into an apartment alone. Isabel had returned to her parents. I felt nothing hearing it. No satisfaction, no pity, just empty acknowledgement. David had been right. Some people can't handle losing. It breaks something fundamental in them. Leo's entire identity had been built on getting what he wanted. When the world finally said no, he didn't have the tools to cope. That wasn't my fault, but it still hurt. Richard visited in February, driving up through slush and mud. We sat on the porch bundled in coats, drinking coffee and watching eagles hunt over the valley. He apologized again, properly this time. I believed Leo's story because it was easier than believing my nephew could be that manipulative. That's on me. I should have called you first, heard your side. I'm sorry, Beatrice. I forgave him because holding grudges took energy I didn't have anymore. We talked about Harold, about old memories, about the years before everything got complicated. It felt good to remember that family wasn't always battlefield. Sometimes it had been refuge. Margot came in March, staying a full week. We hiked the easier trails, cooked elaborate meals, and played cards by the fire. She told me about her divorce proceedings, how watching Leo and Isabel's marriage implode had made her examine her own. I'm leaving Tom, she said quietly. I've been unhappy for years. Watching you fight for yourself made me realize I deserve to fight for myself too. We cried together, two women rebuilding lives we thought were settled. She asked if Leo had contacted me. I said no. She nodded. He's ashamed. Isabel told him it was all his fault, that he destroyed everything. He can't face you knowing you were right all along. Spring arrived with wildflowers and returning birds. I planted a garden, something I'd never had time for when I was taking care of Harold. Tomatoes and zucchini and herbs that made the air smell like hope. Neighbors I'd barely met stopped by, word having spread about my legal battle. One older woman brought homemade jam and said, "Heard you stood up to family trying to take advantage. Good for you. Not enough women our age have that spine." I realized I'd become someone new in this fight. Not just Harold's widow. Not just Leo's mother. Beatrice. A woman who knew her worth and defended it. David called in May with final news. The trust is completely settled. All assets transferred, all documentation filed. You're legally protected now in every way possible. And I should tell you, Leo's new attorney contacted me. He's not contesting anything. He's accepted the terms. Your son made the smart choice, even if it took him too long to make it. I thanked David and hung up. Then I sat on my porch and let myself cry properly for the first time since this all began. I cried for the son I'd thought I had. For the family I'd thought we were. For Harold, who'd loved Leo despite seeing his flaws. For myself, for having to become hard when I'd only wanted to be soft. But when the tears stopped, something else remained. Peace. Real, earned, hard-won peace. The cabin was mine, legally and morally. No one could take it. No one could claim it. Harold's trust protected me exactly as he'd intended. I'd honored his love and his foresight. I'd proven I was stronger than anyone, including myself, had believed. The mountains stretched endlessly around me, indifferent to human drama. The elk grazed. The eagles hunted. The seasons turned. And I remained. Not defeated. Not diminished. Just older, wiser, and finally free. I rocked slowly in Harold's chair and watched the sunset paint the valley gold. This was what we'd saved for. This peace. This silence. This hard-earned solitude. And it was worth every fight, every tear, every moment of doubt. Thank you so much for watching this story to the end. If Beatrice's journey moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories. Drop a comment below telling us what you thought. Did Beatrice do the right thing? Would you have handled it differently? We read every single comment and love hearing from you. Share this video with someone who needs to hear a story about standing up for yourself, no matter your age. Remember, it's never too late to fight for what's rightfully yours. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, stay strong, stay true, and never let anyone make you feel small. Take care, everyone.